Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. Yeah, I'm well. This is a new one for us. We're recording in daylight.
We are in daylight. We're taking full advantage of the bank holiday that is here in the UK, and we're doing a daytime one.
Yep, and it's episode, we're on 114, I think.
We are indeed on 114.
And it's the 1st of April 2024. And as you say, it's a bank holiday. We're recording in the morning. Hopefully Apple won't buy Nintendo throughout the day, and we'll all be good.
And most of the things here are serious. I don't think we've got any April Fools planned.
Oh, no, I've forgotten about April Fools. No, I'm not a big fan of April Fools because I think it's rubbish. So, I look a bit different this week. I've got my son's gaming headset on as I forgot to charge my AirPods Pro Max and was worried they would cut out partway through on 1% of battery. So we're going to give this a go.
You don't only look a bit different because of that. You have a new webcam, right?
Oh, got a new webcam, but now you've just spoiled thing of the week. So we will discuss that. But I do have a new webcam, so let's try that out. It's not my iPhone. It's a Logitech
So let's
MX
check
Pro.
out. Very nice. Check out the YouTube video if you want to see the changes to Chris. Shall we fire away and do some follow-up?
Yeah, let's get straight into it. So what have we got first up? A cool keyboard.
Cool keyboard. So I thought this was just interesting, actually, that I've talked in this podcast before about my Keychron keyboard. It's a 75% keyboard. I got it for a decent amount of money for a mechanical/gaming keyboard. They're sort of the up-and-coming thing. I know you bought a Logitech MX mechanical one based more or less on that recommendation. This is, I think, a sub-brand of Keychron who've produced this Lemo Key P1, and basically it's just built down to a price. It looks identical to my keyboard, but it's only $99 for the wired version. I think this is really quite good, and you can get it in white as well and a couple of other colours too if you like the look of that. It's a really good keyboard. If you want to get into this sort of market, I just thought this was a cool thing. It's not a thing of the week, but I just think as follow-up goes, it's not bad.
It does look cool, and it's for the wireless one, it's only $20 more, so it's not too excessive. I think it looks really nice. I think the problem I have when I buy a mechanical keyboard is, or I look at them, I never know quite what I want because I don't want it to be too firm, and I never know what the key switches I need are. So I should probably, you can get by those testers, I should probably get one of those because they look like a good fidget toy.
I think it's really good, and I like the 75% size. It sort of doesn't take up too much space on your desktop. I presume the software underlying this will be similar to what I have with the Keychron. You can control all the lights and the RGB pulsing if you want that, or you can switch it all off and just make it white light if you want. It comes with the right tools in the box to swap out Mac keys and Windows keys if you want to sort of swap between them. And they're USB-C as well, which I know is a big thing on this show that we like.
We do like, and they do it in blue with some yellow highlights, which I like the blue. That looks awesome.
Yeah, so just a little shout out to this, and they actually, Keychron produced another one. Well, it was 8-Bit Do actually this week, which isn't linked to in the show notes, but I should have, but I'll just talk about it briefly. That looks like a Commodore 64 classic keyboard, which, considering that was my first computer, I spent a long time with my finger over the hover button for that.
Yeah, I can understand that. You can't be a bit retro. It's interesting, actually, my 12-year-old son, he's already got a couple of keyboards on the go, so I think this is something I can imagine in future years that he'd be into.
Fair enough. Moving on, something about iPads.
It wasn't just iPads, but just an observation. So I was away last week, which is why we recorded early, and I just thought I'd have two notes on travel. So I travelled with my family. We don't usually take a lot of devices with us, so we've got 4 people, 3 of us have phones. One will get a phone in a few years' time. But I always take my iPad because I have to work sometimes. But also I load it up with some movies for the kids on the flight. And it was just interesting that I observed whilst walking up and down the plane, nobody's got a tablet with them really. Maybe, again, people with children that are young. And obviously I wasn't on a business trip. I was on a family holiday. But it's just so few tablets on the plane. I think this is probably where the phones have got so good and so large now that people don't want to bring a tablet as well because they don't need the extra screen real estate as much as they did 13 years ago when the iPad came out in 2011, because back then we had little 3.5-inch phones, give or take, and having a 10-inch iPad made sense, whereas now if you've got a 6.5-inch phone or a 7-inch phone, bringing an iPad doesn't make sense. And it was just something I noticed that nobody's bought an iPad with them if they've got a reasonable phone. I just thought that was an interesting observation. And so maybe this is why iPads are struggling in the current market, because like you, people probably don't have that room for that third device. The reason when they introduced the iPad that Apple made a big sell on, we think there's enough space for your phone, an iPad and a Mac. And I think they were right back then, but I think the world has moved on, and therefore there is less of a market, I guess, for an iPad size sort of tablet, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. I guess it's a holiday flight and not a business one. I'd say on the business, more focused ones that I tend to go on, you do see not a lot of iPads, but I'd say, I don't know, 10%, 15% of the people traveling have probably got an iPad. Most of them aren't doing work on them. Most of them are watching, downloading Netflix or something like that. I would have thought on a holiday flight that kids might have smaller iPads and they might be using them, or Kindle Fires or something like that would be cheaper. But that's quite interesting.
There were a couple of Kindle Fires, but like I say, just literally no iPads. It was just super interesting because you've got people reading books, you've got people on their phones, and then where you have got people that are too young, they're largely on a cheap, we want them to have a very cheap tablet, don't you? Because they're not going to look after it. It was just my observation that there was just very few tablets. Like you say, on work trips, I see people using them, and that's interesting. And we're seeing a little bit of work, but I think people are still finding it hard to find that gap of do I bring my iPad or do I bring my laptop or do I bring both? So just an observation.
No, I think it's a good one, and I'd back it up because that's absolutely me. I used to carry an iPad, phone, and a Mac, and now I don't carry the iPad because it's just a waste of space. And if I do want to watch something on a flight, the battery on my phone is now good enough. I've got an external battery. If I need to charge it, it's easy to find charging. The screen is big enough. I can just watch Taskmaster on my flight on my phone.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next point. Why haven't Apple done USB-C MagSafe power brick? Because I've got the Lightning one. It's fantastic. I just want to buy it again, but with USB-C. I'm trying to eradicate Lightning from my setup, but I just don't understand why they haven't done that yet. I mean, the iPhone's been out since September. It just seemed odd because I took my Lightning backpack with me, used it on the flight just to top my phone up. Where is it? I find that really bizarre.
I've always thought it was a strange product for Apple to have. I know they make cases, not very good ones these days, it must be said. We've been through the fine woven disaster. That particular sort of magnetic USB Lightning battery case was sort of sized to your phone. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of dependent on having an iPhone 15, 15 Pro, 14, 14 Pro, whatever it would be, I think. But it was only 75% of the phone it would charge to. So no matter what you bought, it wasn't charging your phone up all the way, was it?
Yeah, so it charges to 80%, but you're thinking of the older ones that were sized. But since they did MagSafe, you can now just buy I've got it over there, like a little MagSafe block that you attach. It doesn't matter which phone you have. So it does work over the generations. I think it's great. It works with all the software. It's fully integrated. But I just don't get why they haven't updated it for USB-C. It just seems like a home goal. Even if they did nothing to it, but just swap the port out, people would buy them. I just don't know why they seem to be doing USB-C in dribs and drabs again. Anyway, I wasn't going to talk about it too much, but I think it's a great product. And where is it?
You're the only person I know with one.
Okay, well, I'm probably, I think that's fair. I think I'm the only person that I know with one. Because people commented on work as well. Like, why, Chris, why have you got one? Like, why haven't we all got one of these? Because you do pay a slight premium for it.
You do, and that's the answer, I think, as to why you're not seeing them rush out of the market, is that if nobody buys them, why would it be a product you rush out to bring to the next thing? People can charge faster through USB-C, through one of these big Anchor battery packs or something like that can give you an awful lot of power in a very short space of time. If I'm on the go, I want something that's going to charge my phone up super fast, not on the limited 15-watt MagSafe.
Yeah, that's fair. Whether they do one with Qi 2 now, because obviously that's come to all the iPhones from the iPhone 12 onwards, I think. So, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. But you're right. Maybe it is too much for a premium product. I got it on an Amazon sale, because why not? You get like 30, 40 quid off. So that's why I have it. And then finally, just to circle back to the iPad piece, I've said that they're missing on the iPhone, on the plane, sorry. They're also missing in real life. Apple still haven't brought them out, and apparently we're going to get them in May. So I'm a little disappointed by that because I'm desperately looking for one because I promised my son my old one, should I buy a new one? And he's like, when am I getting my new one? I was like, I don't know. So there you go. No new iPads till May, potentially. So another month of me moaning.
Well, I think that's all right. It gives us something to look forward to, and will give us content in May. So that's something. Again, you may be the only person in my life that I think is excitedly waiting for new iPads, but I'm glad somebody is.
I think I just want some new tech. I haven't bought any new tech. I've got the same laptop, the same desktop that I'm talking to you on, and the same iPad that I've had probably for the last couple of years. So it's been quite a tech-free time in my house, and I like my new toys.
There's a lovely keyboard I mentioned at the top of the show that you might want to check out.
Yeah, it says the person looking around is like 3 or 4 keyboards in the shed. So I'm not sure I should buy more keyboards just yet, but my son would be excited if I did because he would get some cast-offs.
Moving on, this is just a bit of follow-up on the Department of Justice the DMA Act madness, and just some interesting things. Gruber has once again been bashing the EU, which I think is problematic, and he's not doing himself any favours. He's not covering himself with glory with those of us bloggers who used to not bloggers, YouTubers, whatever we are these days, podcasters certainly, that used to respect his opinion, I think. And he still comes out with the occasional acute take, which is why I haven't unfollowed him. But he was, and there's a link to Steve Troughton Smith's thought on this, if he's stupid enough to say things like, well, Apple will just pull out of the EU because it's only a 7% market share, it's just incredibly short-sighted. How many Apple stores have Apple got in the EU? And how much of their manufacturing or support staff are based in countries like Ireland, Denmark, Netherlands? They've had previous chief executives, Jean-Louis Gasset, who came from, the EU. I think their financial officers from Italy. There is no way Apple are going to pull out of the EU. It's easier to just comply with the law, surely.
Yeah, and look, if Apple has trouble complying with laws in countries, I think you've got this in another thread, then they're going to struggle to sell in many countries, aren't they? So I'm kind of with you here, and I think the EU is a big enough market. It's a lot, obviously, of small countries, largely relatively small countries, compared to something like the size of America, but I think this is stupid, and I don't think what the EU is asking for is ridiculous, and I think we've all said it. Apple could have got there under their own steam, elected not to get there under their own steam, and therefore have been forced to do things that they don't want to do. So I think they've left everything far too late.
I agree. And then the second toot is from Jeff Johnson, who makes another application, and I'm going to read it out. It would be total insanity for Apple to deprive all App Store developers worldwide, including me in the United States, of revenue from the phone and Mac customers in the EU, just to prevent EU developers from distributing software outside of the App Store. Apple can't simply ditch the EU without side effects. Why would it make financial sense for them to do this? It's not that hard to satisfy the DMA. Just allow sideloading like the Mac. Done.
Yeah, agreed. And it's 7% of App Store revenue, but how much hardware revenue is in there, on the iPhone, maybe the iPad, accessories, films, Macs? It's not just App Store, is it? So there's probably a much bigger number in there. They've obviously tried to pick a small number to, explain why they're doing what they're doing. But
the long and the short of it is Gruber can't say stuff like this with it. He needs to think a little bit harder about these kinds of statements.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. It seems very naive for somebody that's normally fairly well thought out, fairly considered, and he just seems incredibly naive on this one. I find it really bizarre.
It's upsetting, actually. Like I say, I've been a respecter of what he said for a very long time, and just watching this gradual transformation to be not even that gradual. It kind of came out of nowhere. The EU is wrong, Apple is right, and he's the same on the Department of Justice stuff, which tails nicely into what we're saying. This and the next thing is that there's a weird sort of clause in what they've said to the Department of Justice are pointing out that they're citing the evidence of Apple doing share buybacks of its own shares rather than spending money on R&D. As part of the reason as why they're becoming monopolistic and things, and I'm just like, that's a bit odd. That's not evidence of lack of competition, but it is interesting the way other agencies and other governments are looking at what Apple's done over the time.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about share buybacks as I work for a company that does this, and I thought I hadn't really dawned on me this, but share buybacks basically is a way to spend your excess capital. If you're a company that's got some cash, you can buy back your shares off the stock market. In essence, it takes them out of circulation, and so it's a way of driving up your share value. There's less shares in circulation, so if somebody owns 10% of your company, you buy back a load of shares, their then 10% could grow to 11 or 12% without them, in essence, spending any more money, because there's less shares in circulation. The shares they have are worth more. It's a way of driving up your share price. Like I say, I work for a company that's done this. So I do find this one a little interesting, that they spent $77 billion in the last fiscal year buying back shares, but they only spent $30 billion on R&D. And I think what the DOJ are trying to say is, you spent so little money relatively, on R&D, that surely you're not feeling that there's any competition. But yet it's still $30 billion in a year, whereas obviously they spent over double that and a bit. Well, it's double 0.5, I guess, on buybacks. So I guess that's how they're seeing it, that you can spend so much money just buying your shares back to make yourself look good financially, but you're not needing to innovate to be more competitive because you've got a monopoly.
Yeah, that is quite interesting, isn't it? And maybe that's why you're not seeing your new iPads, as they're too busy buying their shares back.
They still spent 30 billion though, but they've got so much cash they can afford to do both.
Not if they're about to get fined by every government in the world for 10% of their market turnover.
Yeah, maybe this is why for years and years they've been keeping a war chest of so much cash around, which is unlike most companies don't do it. They just don't have this sort of war chest, whereas Apple famously have kept so much cash, and maybe they've kept it for this reason because they knew the day of reckoning would come.
Simple thing to fix, though. Anyway, I think that was it for follow-up, unless you've got something else you want to talk about.
No, I think that's it. It has been relatively quiet, and obviously in some countries it's a 4-day week and what have you, so there's been, I think, just generally less news. There just isn't much tech news this first half of the year. Like exciting product for me. I'm saying product releases and games dropping and stuff. I don't know. I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, if you're into gizmos, there's probably not very much. But let's fire into the news and let's do this section, because you did miss a couple of tech-related stories that I think, well, you'll have a chance to catch up on them now, obviously. But the first one was kind of a hack that blew up over just before the long bank holiday weekend in here in the United States. About it's kind of a social engineering hack as much as anything else. Lots of bloggers and well-known users were seeing password reset requests coming from the app for Apple ID. And these are really quite worrying because they dominate your screen. Normally, they'd come into your email, you could ignore them if people were trying to do them. But actually, you've got to dismiss the dialogue on iOS. It steals focus from the device, and people were getting hundreds of these things, not just one or two of them, but it was entirely taking over the devices. Reset your password, and if you clicked allow, whoever had access to your email address potentially could have been able to hack your password. So this was a problem, and then it was compounded by some people getting phone calls from people purporting to be Apple too, who knew an awful lot about them. So obviously their data is on the dark web, they potentially knew where they lived, they potentially knew their postcode, they had some information about the Apple devices that they'd bought. This was quite a sophisticated hack that Apple doesn't really have a solution for. If you read all the materials, and I've linked to a Lifehacker article in this case, all you can do is sit there and click don't allow.
Yeah, so I did miss this actually, I must confess, but I read through this in preparation for the show. I had not heard about this, but actually once you read it through, it kind of makes sense what the attackers are doing. But again, you're quite right in there's just no good way. And this feels like a legacy bit of iOS where you get that modal pop-up. It pops up right in the middle of the iPhone. You've got two options, allow or don't allow. And it did remind me a little bit, again, whilst on holiday and hotspot my phone for my children. That works in the same way. Do you want to allow child to hotspot your phone because they're in your family? And again, it's allow, don't allow. And it seems like they're legacy bit to the OS that haven't been moved into Notification Center, because that would be the obvious place for it. But it's that legacy modal bit which Apple haven't mopped up yet, if that makes sense. But this one is interesting, like you say, because the only way of getting rid of it is to continually tap don't allow until the hacker stops sending the requests. But you can see how some people would just go, oh, I'm bored of this, I'll just click allow. What's the worst that can happen? Obviously, the worst that can happen is your account gets compromised and somebody's reset your iCloud password and you're in a whole lot of pain.
Absolutely. It's not a great look. So I would hope that A, they can stop the hackers doing this kind of thing, and B, Apple could probably need a more sophisticated way to deal with this.
Yeah, 100%. And you'd have thought with a lot of the recent security things they did a lot of stolen device protection, which I think is very good. But you'd have thought as part of that, they'd have a better way of dealing with reset passwords. If you've got more than X number of requests in so many seconds or minutes that it would time out or go, you can't request again for another hour. A bit like when you put your PIN code in incorrectly too many times.
Yep. I mean, that's a very sensible solution to this, isn't it? You're wearing out your tries here.
Yeah.
Obviously, something odd is going on. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to implement, you wouldn't have thought. So, yeah, not a great one.
Well, they've already done it, haven't they, with passcode, like I say, so they just need to bring that here. It just feels like part of their legacy estate. And it must be hard, though, for tech companies, because you've got all this stuff just gets built up over the years. You keep adding and adding and adding. You never really take much away. And sometimes they don't go back and invest effort in the bits that have been there for a long time. But you've got to think, like with last year with the stolen device piece, this will come at some point, but how long that will take, who knows?
Yeah, it's a worry. But it's been bad for security stuff altogether this week, actually, because our second story is a backdoor that's been found in SSH, and this is quite a worrying one that we're not entirely sure how long it's been there. It doesn't affect every distribution in the world. If you've installed Brew, Homebrew, which I've recommended as an app of the week before now, it may well have installed this particular thing because a developer, the sort of backstory to this is it's an open source piece of software. It's a bit like that XKCD cartoon where so much of the internet depends on one guy in Nebraska maintaining a thing. Maybe Chris can find the link for that while I'm talking about what this is. But the idea was the maintainer of this, so one guy who was passionate about it, which is true of so much open source software, was maintaining this. At one point, he wanted to hand it over to somebody else. There was only one other guy helping it maintain this. The guy he handed it over to that was maintaining it inserted a backdoor into the password into the program, and I did a little bit of reading. What the backdoor is effectively he added a dot in a comment file somewhere that was just enough to allow him to have root access, or potentially other bad actors to have root access to SSH connections, so secure shell connections, to people's computers. This is a really bad one. It's only in bleeding edge releases. I think it primarily affects Fedora, Homebrew, like I've said, and a couple of other sort of absolute front end top releases for people who want the latest software. Fixes will come. If you do a brew update, brew upgrade on your Mac, it'll fix it very quickly. But this is not great, and it just shows how easily one of these things can be slipped in by a bad actor and how hard they can be to spot. So it's fairly fundamental to lots of server connections, secure connections around the world, SSH. We've used it for a long time. You don't want these backdoors.
No, this one was quite surprising, but it sounded like it was largely in beta versions of Linux, so hopefully not too scary, but scary enough, I think, as a wake-up call for people, because we've seen this before with other software, how people can inject malicious code into it, and it is still a concern that this happens. As it's like playing whack-a-mole, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, very much so, but it's worth highlighting. So I think moral of the story is update, upgrade today. Sort of, if you're using any of these things, then do it. I was running Fedora 40, a beta, as my Linux box on the other side, so I had to update immediately. But it updates all the time anyway, so it wasn't too much of a problem. But yeah, a worry.
Yeah, definitely. I am struggling to find your cartoon. Sorry, I've gone off on a XKD minefield of different cartoons. So I will continue to look in a minute.
It's an easy rabbit hole to fall down. Moving on, we have a story from OpenAI, them of ChatGPT fame. They've been in the news twice this week, actually. They had one with the Sora one, the video, the ability to create short clips of animated thing that we talked about on the podcast before. But this is quite interesting in these days of voice cloning and deepfakes and all the rest of it. Apparently their AI model only needs 15-second sample of your voice to generate a replacement for you. That's fairly terrifying.
Yeah, and if you click on the link in the article, there's a sample of voice recording provided, and then there's 3 samples of what it can do with that. OpenAI seem to be on it at the moment. It's amazing how much they are churning out in quick succession. I find it super interesting. But yeah, this is a little scary. If you're worried that your voice is your passport, anybody seen Sneakers? This would do it for you. You just need that small snippet of somebody's voice, and then all of a sudden it's got the right pitch and tone, and it can go and say a lot of words that you didn't say in the recording and piece them together. So it's incredibly clever.
Yeah, it really is. I found the link for the XKCD thing, so don't panic.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah, so interesting. I think, as you say, OpenAI are on it. They've got their chief executive back in, and they're just firing on all cylinders at the moment. And I guess let's see where it goes next. I did the Apple voice generation thing. It's all right. It sounds a bit like me. It sounds a bit computerized. The sort of save your voice thing in case you get Parkinson's or something like that, just to see what it would be like. You and I have an awful lot of our voices on the internet, so I don't know. We need to be more worried than others.
I hate hearing my own voice, so I'm quite happy not to hear it. If I'm being honest.
Fair enough. Do you want to tell us about Samsung and the iPhone SE?
Yes, apparently, again, this is a product rumoured for a long time, but doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon. So Apple's iPhone SE at the moment is still, I think, the last iPhone with a home button. It's potentially coming out some point this year. They seem to have a lot of phones coming out this year, maybe early next year. So they're going to move the iPhone up to not have a home button. And apparently Samsung aren't going to make the screens for it, but they're going to use BOE in China, which is interesting because you'd have thought they'd want to do anything but continue their reliance upon China, as we've heard a lot about Apple moving manufacturing out. But I guess if they've got to hit their price point to preserve their margins, it depends what's king. What's more important strategically for the company? Is it price point, or is it where the manufacturer is based? And yeah, it looks like BOE instead of Samsung. I guess it's interesting for Samsung. they must do rather well out of the smartphone market. They're the biggest Android hardware manufacturer, and yet they provide a reasonable number of parts to Apple as well. So they're doing well on both ends of this.
Yeah, and you think SSDs that go into MacBook Pros and all manner of things that Samsung make. They're such a big conglomerate company that make everything you can think of. So, yeah, they're winning by column A or column B, aren't they? But I agree with you that considering they are trying to move out of China, this is a very interesting way for them to go. I think BOA made something else for Apple in the past, I've got vaguely in the back of my head, but I can't remember what it is.
No, and often you do see though. They use sometimes different suppliers, whether they've done it for modems in the past. I think they had Intel modems and Qualcomm modems. Intel ones weren't very good. And then they've had LG and Samsung doing screens, I guess because they're making them in such quantities. Probably different though for the SE, is it's obviously a much lower volume phone. They probably can have one supplier, whereas like I say, for the bigger, more tech, recent phones, they probably do want to diversify their supply chain a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Moving on, the next story is it's one of those doesn't surprise me in the slightest in one way. So a few years ago, Facebook/Meta announced they were going to have a VPN. You could safely and securely put all your stuff via Facebook's VPN. But of course, you couldn't safely put all your stuff via Facebook's VPN because they decided they were going to snarfle all the moving data around inside of that, and they've been using it to look at what people's Snapchats and everything else that they've been posting via data traffic decryption. So Facebook got a Facebook, I guess.
It is just typical Facebook. And look, it's obviously worked well for them because they bought Instagram for $1 billion. And they were 100% right to buy it. It was the right thing. But the only reason they bought it wasn't gut instinct. It was because they got lots of data on who was using what. Same with WhatsApp. And this is Facebook, like you say, doing Facebook. How can we get people's data without them knowing really what they're giving up, and therefore use it strategically to make an acquisition, to build a new feature so that we stamp out or acquire the opposition.
Yeah, it's really scummy. It's a man-in-the-middle attack is basically what they did. To take all the data in, decrypt it, look at what people were doing, what they were posting, how they were using it, what Snapchat potentially were embedding in there as well, and then re-upload it again, so Snapchat had no idea what was going on. They called the Project Ghostbusters because it was to do with the logo, and it's just nasty, basically. So now there's a lawsuit alleging Meta are trying to steal corporate data and steal people's, all the stuff they're always accused of, basically. So, yeah, nasty.
But for somebody like Facebook, they've obviously gone and made all the money anyway in the intervening years that they can afford just to then defend it later in court. It's the typical Facebook MO, isn't it?
Yeah, they're not a nice company, really. But we've said that before. Moving on, Apple have done something nice. There's a new web page of tutorials available if you're trying to learn some Swift. I think this is always good. There's never enough Swift tutorials out there as far as I'm concerned. Every time I sit down to learn it again, because I've forgotten everything I ever learned the last time, I start from scratch pretty much. So I fully endorse this. Well done, Apple.
Yeah, no, this looks good. They did something like this a few years ago with Swift on the developer part of the apple.com website. And it looks like they've just updated it, which is great. And it takes you through everything from get Xcode to do some coding. I think they do some good tutorials, and they're interactive, and there's lots of screenshots. So it really is great for beginners, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I'd agree with this. And it looks nice. You know, it does. Considering we always hear of other developers complaining about the lack of documentation for their APIs and things like that. For the basics, at least, they seem to be making a little bit of progress.
Yeah, and I think generally they are making inroads in all of their documentation. They're just equally, as they make inroads, they're annoying their developer community at the same time.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this, really. That, you're making it more accessible to people to use Swift. At the same time, experienced Swift developers are very, very fed up with the way Apple's going and, all the stuff we've talked about with DOJ and DMA and et cetera, et cetera. Are they trying to attract new developers because they're losing the old ones? Or are they just trying to make it more accessible? It's hard to say.
Bit column A, I think, bit column B.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Anyway, it's a nice looking site. If you are trying to learn a little bit of Swift, it's probably not a bad place to start. And of course, Hacking with Swift is absolutely worth a look. The material that he puts up there, and fairly local to you in Bath as well. He's well worth supporting and does some fantastic content on YouTube and his books.
Yeah, no, hackingwithswift.com, I believe. Yeah, he's fantastic. So we'd definitely recommend.
Absolutely. Moving on, we've already talked about Facebook once, and as I click it, the link appears to be dead for me, so that's not great. Oh no, it did eventually come up. It's Engadget, and Gadget can occasionally be a bit on the slow side, and I don't often link to them. Ever since the iPhone theft incident back in the day with the iPhone 4, was it? I think it was an Engadget journalist, yeah.
I thought it was Gizmodo.
Was that Gizmodo? You might be right. My
Um,
memory isn't what it was.
Engadget, those used to be a site I would go to every week, if not every few days, because it was fantastic. But you know what? I think it got acquired, and then I've barely ever gone to it. And I was surprised when you put this in the show notes because I was like, oh, I forgot about Engadget. But it used to be such a staple for me, and it was in our office pre-pandemic. But I can't remember where or who acquired it. But I don't know. I don't know. It just drifted out. And I think, to be fair, The Verge has probably overtaken it for me.
Yeah, very much The Verge has overtaken it. Anyway, what Engadget have is a very comprehensive article on sort of the birth and success of WhatsApp, really, and sort of how influential it's become, how it's become a political tool, from its starter of being purchased by Meta to what it is now, and the highlights that it has, even here in the UK, Boris Johnson losing his encryption key to WhatsApp, so he didn't have to disclose things to the COVID inquiry. Bolsonaro has been involved with it. Narendra Modi from India makes use of it. It really has become the communication medium for so much, and in fact, apparently it's even making inroads in America now. The whole green bubble, blue bubble thing is becoming less of an issue because more Americans are turning to WhatsApp for their communications too. I've gone back onto WhatsApp because it's just the way you have to talk to people. I don't like the fact that as soon as you launch the app, they snarf all your contact details and your contact images and all that kind of stuff. But at least they can't see the content of your communications, right? It is end-to-end encrypted, but that payoff, it's a bit of a struggle. Isn't it interesting that something that Meta owns, and we've just been knocking Meta quite heavily for what they've done, has kind of become the communications medium for so much of the world?
100%. So my son, who had an iPhone about 9 months ago, he does everything on WhatsApp, and as he's talking to me or my wife, that's done by text. But all his friends, they're all on WhatsApp. It is super interesting, and this is why Meta, or what was Facebook at the time, bought them, because obviously they had the inside track with some of their snooping on what people are using. They knew WhatsApp was massive, and it is the de facto messaging platform. I would probably be using it if it wasn't owned by Meta, and if I wasn't going to get spammed by kids' football club, school events, all of that, because I'm quite happy living in my bubble where I don't have WhatsApp, but I am very much in the minority, and I am fully cognizant of this.
It'll probably come for you. There's no getting away from it. So WhatsApp is around, in 2020, WhatsApp had 2 billion users around the world. iMessage 1.3 billion. Not a platform, remember, iMessage, bit odd that. TikTok 1 billion, Telegram 800 million, Snap 400 million, and Signal 40 million. It's interesting, Signal, the highest encryption, highest privacy, is the smallest amount of users, isn't it?
Yeah, Signal's quite an interesting one. I've been reading a few articles about Signal actually in an actual newspaper. They're kind of there in the background, aren't they? But they're more in the sort of tech community. They've not gone mainstream yet, and I think they're going to struggle because WhatsApp's there. It's done it. People don't need another messaging app.
Well, they don't, but for those that don't like Meta in all their pies, then there is that option, isn't there?
There is, but then you've got to get your friends onto it. And that's
Yeah.
why I've just stuck with text message, because you find people don't want another system to do the same thing.
And that is the problem. But you're in the minority in text messages, as we've talked about before, because most people have moved to an alternative platform.
I appreciate I'm 100% behind the curve here.
Good stuff. Or maybe bad stuff. Moving on. We talked about them before, Fujitsu, as part of the Horizon scandal here in the UK. They made the post office system that put lots of people in jail and cost them traumas and committed suicides and all sorts of things. They've just been awarded another contract, and this time it's for the UK's digital ID scheme. Hooray!
The timing of this could scarcely be any worse, could it? So this is about people in the UK having digital ID cards, and Fujitsu, preferred bidder. Like, the timing, come on now, really? Like, the post office thing, obviously, we've spoken about it before. It's still at fever pitch. This is not the right thing to do. Like, read the room, pick anybody but Fujitsu.
Why? I'm surprised Fujitsu even bid for it. Really, their PR profile must be absolutely rock bottom.
Maybe they need to get some more cash in to pay the bills. What? Maybe they just had a punt, and but actually their punt turned out to be pretty good.
So I mean, I think they do read the room, and we featured the story that they weren't going to bid for any more UK contracts, and then they won a Northern Irish one. I seem to remember as featuring. But from this article, in January, Fujitsu wrote to the UK government to confirm it would no longer tender for business in the public sector because of the post office scandal. However, it appears this procurement was already in train by the time that decision was made. Maybe that's why they said they could. Yeah, well, absolutely, we won't make any more, but we're going to keep doing the ones we already bid for because it's big.
Could they not pull out, or the government go, we're not going to go with you, Fujitsu, because of this scandal quite recently?
This government and scandals, without getting too political, they're not that bothered. They've got another one along in 5 minutes.
No, and I'm sure they just delete their WhatsApp history should it blow up in court.
Absolutely, and let's face it, they're not going to be the government in a few months' time. So,
well, potentially, yeah, we potentially have an election coming up, but we don't know when yet.
Yeah, it's going to be this year.
Oh yeah, no, it's 100% this year. We just don't know which month.
No, we don't know which month. But there's lots of elections coming in the world. It's going to be an interesting few. I think 2024 is going to be interesting for lots of countries.
Yeah, all around the world. I can't remember. There is a stat of how many hundreds of elections there are. It's a ridiculous number.
I've skipped over a story and you've highlighted it, so you can tell us about that one.
Yeah, so I quite like the look of this one because we've probably all been there. You go and buy a new iPhone and it's got older software on it. And it could be whether you got it on day one and it hasn't got the latest day one patch, because occasionally Apple will drop a small update for the very new iPhones, or you go and buy an iPhone in 3 months' time and it's because it got manufactured so long ago, it's not up to date. What Apple have developed, and we have spoken about this before, is they've got a way where in an Apple store, employees can take an iPhone in a box and put it, I don't know what you call it, like in a toaster that they're referencing it to. So in like a horizontal toaster, and you put it in the right place, and it will firmware update through MagSafe and charge, which I think is fantastic if they've done this, because it is frustrating when you get a new device, especially if you're moving over to it from an existing device that's on a newer operating system. You then need to update that device before you can transfer all your data over. And also, it's not a great experience, is it? You buy a brand new device, it's already out of date. So I think this is really cool that Apple are doing this. So at least when you get your new device, it should be a lot more current with the OS than what it was when it was manufactured. So quite cool. It's going to be interesting to see the success rate I'm going to go with of, does it install correctly, does it all work fine when the user gets it. But I think it's pretty neat. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this, as I think it'll be a much better experience for people, because it's hard getting people to install updates.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that frustration of, here's your new thing, and the device you're using is newer than the one you've bought software wise. Oh, I can't do anything until I've installed an update, and it is a real pain point for people. So not only can they immediately start using their phone, but they're actually delayed for another 20 minutes or half an hour, whatever it is, while all these updates and enough batteries in it and blah blah blah. It's a good thing. I'm surprised more manufacturers haven't thought about this kind of thing. Devices sitting in boxes with massively old software on them. It's funny, we were talking about cameras before the podcast started, and they're a particular pain point. If you've got an old school offline camera, like from Nikon or Canon or something like that, and you want to put firmware on it, that's an adventure.
Yeah, they're not really built for it, are they? It's a bit janky. Speaking of which, when I bought my new webcam, first thing I had to do, install a firmware update.
Yeah, it's a thing. And let's face it, even your headphones need firmware updates these days. It's a bit crazy.
Probably not the ones I'm trying out that my son has lent me. But yeah, you're quite correct. My AirPods Pro obviously have batteries and firmware in it.
So 'tis the happiest time of the year for some of us that the dates of WWDC have been announced. So WWDC 24 is going to happen between June 10th and June 14th, 2024. There will be a special event at Apple Park, and they're going to do the video thing that they did last time. It's quite a cool logo they've got. It sort of glows and it moves around on the link to webpage. There's going to be a focus on AI. Greg Joswiak came out. Greg Joswiak came out to say, so this is going to be what Apple are doing this year coming forward in operating systems, and we'll have betas for iOS, iPadOS, tvOS, macOS. I'm missing one. HomeOS as well, presumably.
I wonder if this is the year they actually call tvOS HomeOS, because it's been rumoured for so long, but yet never seems to come. I was a bit disappointed with the logo, I must confess, because it just looked a bit samey to ones they've done in the past. I was just a bit... But no, I'm excited by it. There's some good stuff coming up. I also don't like what they've done with the WW, because they're missing a V of a W, basically. It looks like
It looks
one
like
and a half.
VVDC.
Yeah, it's like 1.5 W. So I'm not sure about the logo. But hey ho, maybe AI generated it. But yeah, it's going to be a big AI leaning. But it's always good when you get WWDC because generally you get an event where you don't spend any money, but you're going to get some cool new software later in the year on largely the devices you've got, if you've got a device within the last circa 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting time of year June when it happens will be an interesting time of year for you and me because we go, no. Well, I go, no, I'm not installing it. And then they announce a feature that I have to have on my iPhone. And then I install it and then my phone doesn't work properly for 3 or 4 months. And I complain about my banking app not working. And I'll say it again now and get it in early. Don't install Beta OS on your hardware, guys, unless you're mental. Whereas Chris is just loving it, installs it on everything and, and Carpe Diem and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I wonder how this will go this year in the light of DOJ, DMA, developer discontent.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think. And I wonder if it's why we've had such a lull now, because we haven't got a beta happening at the moment. And it's unlike Apple not to have a beta always happening, if that makes sense, especially for the iPhone. So it's a bit of a strange time. And I wonder if that's because they're trying to sort the DOJ stuff out. It sounds like iOS 18 is going to be a massive update, though. They're talking about home screens, they're talking about AI. There's apparently a lot of change coming, the biggest release ever, which probably scares me more on the beta side, because sometimes when they say the biggest release ever, they also mean the most painful release ever. I'm looking forward to it. I'm probably more interested in what's going to come to the iPad, because I want to see some more things there to make it more laptop-like or desktop class, but who knows whether I'll get my wish.
Yeah, so 3 links there for those that are interested. Apple's own one's WWDC, Jason Snell's take from 6 Colors, and the absolutely incredible AI focus. I don't think we need to go into the AI stuff because I think we can guess a lot of what we'd like to see in there and what we wouldn't like to see in there. But yeah, interesting and worth a look.
The only thing I was going to say on AI was a quote I saw on Mastodon from, I can't pronounce this lady's last name, a lady called Joanna, but she was saying that, the biggest problem with pushing all things AI, wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, and not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and my dishes. And I thought, actually, do you know what? That's pretty good, because at the moment, AI is doing a lot of the fun stuff. I get you can use it obviously to write your CV, a cover letter, the things that are usually boring and people don't enjoy doing. But it also does a lot more of the creative outlets, which people do enjoy, like coding, for example, and assisting with that. And I just thought that was a great take on it of, we're going to end up with AI doing the fun stuff, and then we just do the monotonous stuff. So, yeah, I just thought it was an interesting take.
No, I think it's a good point, well made. So well done, that lady.
Yeah, no, agreed. Should we move on to media, or have we got any more news?
No, I think that's probably enough news. I thought I'd done quite well, really, this last over a week to find plenty of stories to talk about, because there, as you say, there's not a lot of hardware, but there's an awful lot of software and sort of in the background stuff.
Yeah, where's the Nintendo Switch 2? Where's Apple's iPads? Where's something from Samsung? I guess we didn't comment a huge amount on the new Samsung 23 phones. They look amazing, but do you know what I mean? It's just been a really quiet time.
I think possibly next week we're going to do a bit of an Android focus, and I'm not going to talk about that this week. I'm going to talk about it later down the line, but we'll have an Android focus.
All right, let's do it.
Moving on, media. So it's been a bank holiday in the weekend. My eldest daughter came back from university. She hasn't seen Oppenheimer, so I sat and watched Oppenheimer for the second time. Still a terrific film. It is 3 hours long. That's how you do a 3 hour long film. Martin Scorsese, go and watch that. Go and learn from a master, frankly. I hate to have to say that to somebody like Martin Scorsese, but that's how you keep somebody entertained with a historical format about true events over that period of time.
I completely concur. Out of all the 3 hour, duration films we've had, it's definitely the best one, I think. I thought it was fantastic, Oppenheimer. I've got it. I bought it ready to rewatch. I just haven't had a 3 hour window carved out for me.
Yeah, so she thoroughly enjoyed it. She managed to miss it during the Barbenheimer days. She said, I'm glad I would have wanted that and then Barbie as a palate cleanser afterwards, because, it's heavy, it's thoughtful, there's a lot of world-changing stuff going on there, and Barbie was perfect afterwards. So she said the timing of those things was actually really nice. She told me I watched them in the right order. I know you didn't like Barbie, but you're wrong. And it was really good to watch it again. And what was even funnier, actually, was we enjoyed Oppenheimer so much, we decided to go back and watch Tenet as well. So we did a Christopher Nolan double bill yesterday of Oppenheimer and then Tenet. And Tenet is another film which I didn't like when I first watched it, but has just got better and better every time I've seen it since.
I would concur with that statement. I think the first time I watched it, I was just like, I don't understand what's happening. But actually, second watch, it does help a lot with that film. I love a Nolan film. I'll be honest, big fan. So yeah, I'm a little jealous of your day yesterday. Sounds a lot more exciting than mine. But I'm looking forward to my kids being that age where I can watch more adult films with them.
No, it was good. And if my younger daughter hadn't been working as well, I think the three of us would have been sat there thoroughly enjoying some films.
I love watching film with the kids. I'm always well up for a film.
That was great. Nolan-tastic. Moving on, another thing I've started watching myself is Three Body Problem. It's Netflix's new show by the creators of, well, the co-writers of Game of Thrones on HBO. Obviously, it's written by somebody else, but they've adapted it for television. It's got most of the cast from Game of Thrones, certainly most of the British cast as far as I can see within it. It's based on a Chinese science fiction novel from the 70s, 80s, I think. So it's quite unusual that it's not from Western culture, that sort of background. It's coming from Eastern culture. It's definitely an interesting take on things. It's got some terrific acting in it. The effects are excellent, I'd say, outshining some of Apple's recent things. I think it's worth a look if you're at all interested in that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's must-see television, but so much of Apple's science fiction output has been quite disappointing to me recently that I was quite interested in taking another look at something else, and this is far more compelling than something like Constellation or one of those.
Okay, and what's the premise for it?
It's quite hard to describe. Something happens. Well, no, it's not that hard to describe. Something happens in China just after the Cultural Revolution in the 60s that obviously causes some sort of first contact with aliens. And it's the repercussions of that go forward to current times, and I think it goes forward again. The sort of mysterious devices have appeared on the planet. Some physicists are seeing a countdown in their vision and committing suicide as a consequence. There's a lot going on. It's more Game of Thrones sort of feeling of violence with, and it's not. Don't get me wrong. It's not explicit violence. People hitting things with sticks generally, apart from a little bit in the Cultural Revolution. It's more sort of psychological as much as anything else. But yeah, it's a really interesting concept, and I think it's worth a look if you're at all interested.
No, it does sound good. I've never seen Game of Thrones, which is controversial. I don't have Netflix, which again probably a massive outlier there at the moment. But what I do is I save up some things and then I will get Netflix for a couple of months. And I'm the same with Disney now because Disney put their prices up. That's expired, and so I will probably alternate between the various streaming shows because I just think it gets so expensive otherwise. But no, I'm interested in the Three Body Problem. When it was called the Three Body Problem, I thought it might be something medical. That's why I was asking because I don't like anything medical myself. So no, I should probably check this out.
I think you should. It's worth a look. Moving on, Taskmaster came back to the UK this week. You might have missed this because you were away. It's as usual. It's just Taskmaster. It's excellent. I laughed and I laughed. It's great.
You can't believe how frustrated I was when I saw you put Taskmaster in here. And I was like, oh, there's a new Taskmaster series, and I hadn't seen it because that is 100% something I will be watching with my children. Possibly when we finish this, if they're up for an hour of TV, because we love it, the three of us. So my wife does not understand it, but she doesn't understand the draw of it, but the three of us love it. So I'm there for Taskmaster.
Yeah, get on it. And it's a good first episode, as they so often are, actually. Good. Okay, moving on. And it's just a final story from me, and then we'll turn to you about vinyl outselling CDs for the second year in a row. Vinyl is really having a killer year.
Yeah, it's amazing it's made a comeback. My eldest son is giving vinyl the side. I think he's after a turntable at some point because he likes mechanical stuff, and obviously he likes music, so right up his street. But yes, it's amazing it's making such a big comeback. I did see something recently about Beyonce's new country album that the vinyl's missing tracks or something that's on the CD. Or so. I mean, it's not really my wheelhouse, country and Beyonce, but it does seem to be making a massive comeback.
Fair enough. 2 good years for vinyl. Both my kids have got to buy vinyl records. They both got vinyl for Christmas, and both sit there and enjoy the tea ceremony involved with vinyl. I can tell they're a different generation to me. I'm quite happy to slam whatever on some streaming music platform.
I'm 100% with you. So my son did get a CD player last year, only a second-hand one, and bought some second-hand CDs. But he again likes that. I think that tea ceremony, and I know it's only putting a disc in and pushing play, but again, it's a bit more of a novelty than just going to your music streaming platform with choice and clicking play.
And we've said it before. I think there is something in having physical media as it goes away, and as the companies decide to take it off us. In fact, I think we might have talked about it last show about them taking it off you. So I don't discourage them for having these things. If you want it forever, you've got it in your hand. It's yours.
I kind of agree, and actually with books, I've probably gone back to buying more physical books than I ever have. I went very digital at one point, and but I've gone back to physical books. I enjoy a physical book, I think, more than a Kindle. I use my Kindle sometimes, but I do like a physical book. And you see it when, again, on my flight recently, there's a lot of people that like a physical book around the pool or on the plane. So there you go.
Yeah, you've made me open my Kindle to see how much charges in it. Just 26%. That shows how last time I opened it.
Yeah, well, I use mine usually for taking notes, as we've discussed before, and that's stuck, by the way. But again, I can also read a book on it. So if I am going on a business trip and I want to take a book, and I don't want to give up luggage space, I just take a book on my Kindle to read.
Fair enough. Anything else in media from you?
So I've watched very little media. Generally, when I go on holiday, I read. I don't really use my device very often. So I've not watched anything. I did watch a bit of Succession on the plane on the way back because I just love that show. So I rewatched the first 3 episodes of series 4 of Succession. It's just fantastic. Such a good show. So it's probably my 3rd watch of it at this point.
Fair enough. Should we do some games?
Yeah, let's get into games.
This isn't going to take very long, and I suspect this is just me as well, because you won't have played many on holiday. So I just want to give a shout out to my Steam Deck, and specifically Balatro on my Steam Deck that I've talked about before. The Steam Deck is a great device that I occasionally forget about and don't pick up enough and have a play with. It's very well thought out. The hardware has lasted. The battery is good enough. And it's perfect for something like a card game like Balatro or Slay the Spire or one of those kinds of games. I know you play Command & Conquer on it, and it works really well in that mode for you. But it's just a really good, not too expensive bit of hardware that's now well into its possibly 3rd year with me. And I love it. I think they've kept it updated. It runs really well. It's not too hot. It's just the joysticks don't drift. I've got nothing bad to say about it, to the extent that I still don't really see the point in the OLED one for me. If I was buying one from scratch, I completely get it. But it's great. And Balatro is just perfect for that kind of device. 3 hours on a train or something like that would fly by with a Steam Deck in your hand. So why would you buy any other mobile console? I understand sort of the compulsion of the Switch and all the rest of it, but it's reaching sort of the peak of its hardware, I think. What it's able to do. You're able to play cutting-edge AAA PC games on a Steam Deck on the train, and that is it's incredible. So a little shout out to Valve and the Steam Deck. They absolutely knocked it out of the park, and Balatro's still a great game.
So I concur with you largely. I think for me, I probably use the Steam Deck slightly differently. I think it's fantastic. I haven't got buyer's remorse. So I didn't wait and get the OLED. I think I got mine refurbished or a sale. I got a pretty good deal on it. It's fantastic. But for me, I use it more as a USB-C docked device so I can play Command & Conquer and games like that. But I don't need a full PC. I don't need to install Windows. I've got a device that's, like you say, kept up to date. It runs what I want to play really well. I can pick up Steam sale games. I could take it on the move a bit more. I generally don't, because I don't need to take another device with me when I go. So I think it's fantastic. But we obviously have the same device but use it in very different ways, which is the benefit of that kind of device, I think. I do have a Switch. The best thing obviously about the Switch is Nintendo's IP. They've got some fantastic games. So that's why you need those 2 devices. But I think, to be fair to Steam, Valve, they looked at the Switch and went, yes, that is a great form factor. Let's do it. And I think they've done a great job. And like I say, I can use it as a USB-C dock device. And part of that benefit for me is I can use it down here in my shed, or I can take it up to my USB-C screen in our, what we call our family room, which is where all the tech is. And my kids they love a bit of Command & Conquer, weirdly. So they can have a play on that, or I can do it down here. So no, I think it's a fantastic device. I'd recommend anybody getting one. And you just haven't got the hassle of drivers. If you just stick to the Steam store, you don't want to, in essence, jailbreak it, sideload it. You can just use it as is. It's not a very techie device. It can be a techie device, but equally it can just be a use it out of the box device.
Yeah, the flexibility of the thing is really what it is. You can use it as a PC if you want. It's a full-on Linux PC under it. You can plug it into your USB screen, as you say, press and hold the button on it, and there you go. You've got a full Linux desktop, KDE desktop running in the background. That's incredible for a device like this, but you'd never need to touch it. Log into Valve, into Steam, download some games, and off you go. And then, you've got more than enough entertainment to get you in. It's a great little device. So it sounds like an advert for the Steam Deck. I just love it a bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Mini Metro.
Yeah, so I put this in the show notes. So one thing we did play on holiday with my children is Mini Metro and Mini Motorways. So we put it on all three of our phones, and we just play the same map at the same time, and compare scores and see who could get the highest score. It was just quite a nice thing to do as a break from the pool, or if we were just relaxing in the hotel room. But it was interesting. My two kids just really got into those games, because they're quite easy to pick up and understand the mechanic of it. And if you've got Apple Arcade or Apple One, you can pick them up both for free. They've been retrospectively added into Apple Arcade, if that makes sense. So I just thought I'd give a call out to them. Very simple line drawing games. Mini Metro, you've got to build train lines between different stations. Mini Motorways, you've got to get cars to shopping centres or factories and back and forth. I just think it's a great mechanic and works really well on that small screen.
Both available in Steam as well, as is Slay the Spire on Apple Arcade, which you can download and should download because it's better than either of those games. But yeah, they are good games. They're good fun.
They're just a nice mechanic, and for a very simple looking game, they've got a nice aesthetic to them, I would say.
Last story, Qualcomm has demoed its new Snapdragon X Elite laptops. Now, these are quite interesting. I've put it in the gaming section, but it probably deserved its own section. The Snapdragon X Elite is an ARM chip that runs Windows, and apparently runs AAA games like Baldur's Gate at almost native speeds. So that's quite interesting. That's Qualcomm really beginning to take it to Apple Silicon, and what that may mean for the future of Windows laptops is also fascinating. I mean, Intel have got to be super worried about this kind of stuff. They've already lost market share to AMD. They've already lost market share to NVIDIA and AMD's graphics cards. And now potentially they're going to have a battery-efficient, powerful, performant chip in a very thin and light laptop that Microsoft's gaming support goes to. We know gamers go there first. If it's good enough for gamers, it's good enough for coders, it's good enough for others. This is a real shot across Intel's bows.
Yeah, Intel must be worried. I mean, they've just floundered, haven't they? They've just marched on back in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and then slowly 2010s to now, they've just ground to a halt over everything. It's not good. It's a bit of a concern.
It is a bit of a concern. It's a concern for Intel. I don't mind competition in the market. I hope that if Qualcomm is good enough, that they actually push Apple. We're going to talk about my M3 in a minute and how that compares to the M1. Competition is good. Apple can compete. Intel should compete. They haven't been. They came back when AMD and what was the other? Was it Cyrix? Was that the other chip manufacturer? I think it was at the same time. AMD and Cyrix. Cyrix went away. But we had the i-series processors from Intel as a consequence of that competition they got from other x86 chip makers. It made Intel chips better. They don't seem to have an answer for this. They don't seem to have a low power ARM chip that they can put out there. But this is good. Otherwise, you want to see competition in the industry.
I completely agree with you. You get better products with healthy competition, but it's just concerning to see them flounder and not really know what they're doing.
Big companies get stale and become the competition, and I think worryingly the signs are there for Apple as well, as we've talked about repeatedly on this podcast. That I hope the entire executive team from Apple step down and they bring in a bunch of people who really can move properly with the market and understand what's going on. It's not going to happen, but that's what needs to happen. These companies are getting entrenched. It's their enshittification all over again. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't know whether they need a whole new board, but they need some fresh thinking to challenge the norm, I think.
I think they need a new CEO.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've come through the Tim Cook era. He's done very well for the company and shareholders, but is he the right person to shepherd it through the next 10 years or so?
Anyway, that doesn't belong in games. Should we do a main show?
Let's do it. So you've got a new toy. You've got new tech.
I have new tech. New to me, anyway, not new from Apple. Well, this newest one's Apple make. I now have a MacBook M3 Pro 14-inch 512GB SSD with 18 gigs of RAM, which is a really weird number, but that's what it comes with.
18 gig of RAM. Okay, that is a strange number. I didn't think that was a thing. It's normally 8, sometimes 12, 16, 24, but 18 is an odd one. I've been doing some odd numbers lately, though.
They have, and it's true across the line as well. If you go for the bigger ones, as soon as you spec them off the default, as soon as you get out of 8 gigs of RAM, it's not the powers of 2 numbers that you and I would expect. It's odd. You get like 68 gigs of RAM, and they're a little bit offset from what, and I think it's a consequence of the silicon on a chip thing that they do.
Okay, and how many cores have you got and all of that? Because this is the bit I thought that Apple were going to simplify. Is you would before we knew what Apple Silicon looked like, you'd just get we didn't know it was going to be M1 at the time, but you'd get an Apple Silicon chip, and you just get that. Whereas they've actually made it more complicated. I think you can have different number of processor cores and different number of GPU cores. But I thought we should just include that, as that seems to be a big differentiator these days.
I think you need to keep talking while I go and look that up.
Well, then I apologise. Because I must confess, if you had to ask me how many cores have I got in either of my Macs, I've got no idea. Because I do think they've made it more complicated, which I'm surprised, because famously Apple usually simplify these things. But what colour have you gone for then? Why don't we start with the colour?
So I think it's called Midnight Black. Is that what it's called?
It's like space black.
Space black, fine. It's space black. It's very, 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 very dark grey. It's not black. So that's the colour I've gone for. As you're talking, I'm trying to look through my system report for my Mac. I can tell you I've got 14 graphics cores. I know that for a fact.
So you've probably got the 11-core CPU.
Probably. Let's go with that. So yeah, it's black. It's not black. It's grey. In the same way my phone is grey, and all iPhone Pros are grey. It's grey. That's what Apple are very good at making. It's a darker grey. I would say the first thing people tend to get asked when you don't go for one of the lighter colours is, what are the fingerprints like? They're okay. They're noticeable. I pick it up and I move it around. The biggest change for me is that it's not a 16-inch laptop anymore. It's now a 14-inch laptop, and that's a more significant difference for weight and heft than I was expecting. It's only 2 inches. You think there's a whole bunch of jokes there that I could go into that I won't, because this is a family-friendly-ish podcast, so I won't go there. But 2 inches doesn't make that much difference screen-wise, but makes a huge amount of difference portability-wise.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I still find the 14-inch is quite heavy. It's still quite dense. It's quite a heavy thing. But I guess if you're coming from the bigger, even more dense 16-inch, it's probably not that bad.
Yeah, if you're coming down in size, it's definitely different. And I notice it I carry my laptop everywhere when I go into work. It goes in my rucksack, and I cycle down to work with it. And I know I'm carrying a 16-inch laptop up to this point. So my 16-inch was an excellent laptop. It was an M1, same chip family, M1 Pro basically. This one is obviously 2 generations on. The SSD's a little bit slower, but everything else is the same. A little bit more RAM, as we've talked about. It's a bit faster. I wouldn't say it's world-changingly faster in anything that I've seen so far. I think the M1s were just so good that the M3, we noticed it with the M2s, and now actually using an M3, yeah, it's a little bit quicker in some tasks, but nothing I'm losing any sleep over. I'd say it's milliseconds, if anything.
Yeah, it is quite interesting looking at them. They've all... I'm not sure if they've gone up in price at all since the M1 Pros originally came out, but you'd expect a bit more performance. But like you say, I think we've reached that point now where how much would you really notice it? And it's probably when you're doing computational or tasks that either use the CPU or the GPU that you're probably going to realise it's going to render your film quicker or compile your Xcode project significantly quicker. But probably in day-to-day, opening an app, browsing the internet, things have got so quick anyway that it's probably marginal gains now.
Yeah, Safari loading quicker is not a thing we look for anymore. So I've split this into good things and bad things. The good things are it's a bit faster. I think the reduction in size is healthy. It's only the very extreme people who really need a 16-inch laptop, and I've noticed it particularly when I'm traveling, coming back to what you were saying at the top of the show, that I was disinclined to get it out on a plane, for example, because it was just too big for the trays and things. So I'd try and do stuff on my phone when actually my laptop would have been better. I read and I write a lot for my job, so having a full keyboard in front of me instead of trying to peck it out on a phone keyboard is definitely an improvement. And the keyboard is excellent. Keyboards in these latest generations of Apple laptops since the M1 have been excellent, and this maintains that. It's a really nice keyboard to type on. It's got more travel than your old standard Apple. I don't even know what this is, Magic Keyboard, whatever it would have been. Don't know. It's the Lightning charging one anyway, without the full trackpad on it. It's a nicer keyboard than that. It has a bit more feel about it. I can type very rapidly on it. The ease of setup with these devices are a lot better. I didn't do a transfer. Here's all your data, move my Mac type thing. I went from scratch because I felt I had a lot of cruft on that. I didn't want any of the Rosetta stuff coming over either. And that was all, with the exception of a couple of very critical things. It went very, very well, I think. You sign in, your devices recognize it, everything just works. It's a really nice laptop. I'm really happy with it. Probably within 55 minutes to an hour, I was largely back up and running again with all my work stuff, everything updated, Homebrew installed on there, everything that I'd want to get up and running with it really, really quickly. It was a pleasurable experience.
It is quick to get up and running, I think, with the device these days because of cloud syncing, but I'm sure you're going to go on to that in a second. It does sound good, and I think if I was buying a laptop, you probably bought what I would go for. I know I've got the M1 Max, but I got it when the M2s came out, and I got it slightly cheaper. So you've probably gone for the sort of spec I would have gone for, because I generally don't need that much hard drive in a laptop like that because of the work I do. I don't do videos, for example.
Well, videos are a relatively new thing for me, but it's nice to have a little more commodious hard disk. So I have gone back down from a terabyte to a 512 with this one, but everything else is better. I'm not noticing at the moment, but we'll see how we go. So that was the good stuff. Shall I talk about some bad stuff?
Yeah, go on then. Give us the you've got to give us the honest feedback.
I will be honest. The speakers are noticeably worse. The 16-inch one just sounded more. The bass was better. The volume was louder. It was just able to hold tones and mid-tones and things like that an awful lot better. Whatever that would be, I don't think it's just space in the laptop. There may even have been more speakers in the 16-inch one. I can't even remember the technical specifications at this point, but it is a noticeable problem. The other thing that we talked last week on it, and then I went to encode the video, and the fans spun up. Never in the whole time I had the M1 Pro did the fans spin up, and they were loud, and they were continuous, and they were consistent all the way through the video encode. So that was quite annoying, actually. I suppose there's less space in the chassis, and maybe there's less, space for heat to go out, but the M3s are clearly hotter than the M1s.
Yeah, that is interesting. Slightly worries me for if they come to the iPad. But yeah, you're right. I don't think I've ever really heard the fans in my M1 laptop or my M1 Mac Mini.
I got my original M1 Pro, MacBook Pro, when they were still in the older chassis, to spin up once by playing Civilization 5 on it at full screen. Not Civilization 6, it would have been fine. But the older Civilization 5, I don't know if the Rosetta encoding or something was having to work harder on that. But it went away after a little bit. It sort of got up to a point and then the fan spun back down and I never heard them again. But like I say, the last one I didn't hear. But this one immediately, within the same day of getting the thing, I managed to get the fans to spin up, and I've been able to do it again since. And I presume when I'm encoding the video and not the audio, just the video for this podcast later, I'll hear him again.
Yeah, sorry, whilst you were talking, I was just checking the tech specs, and the tech specs for the 14 and 16 exactly the same.
Right, so it's just there's more volume in the case, and they can potentially fit slightly bigger speakers or something. So that's a downside, but most of the time you've got headphones on when you use your laptop anyway, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I must confess I found the 14-inch speakers to be really good, but then I've not come from the bigger device to compare them to. But coming from, an older laptop, I think the 14s are very good.
Don't get me wrong, they're great speakers. For a laptop, they're excellent speakers, but they're not as good as the ones in the 16-inch.
But like you say, though, a lot of the time now, especially with AirPods, how much do you actually need speakers in your devices? Probably a lot less. Like, how often am I actually using speakers in my iPad, for example? Like, if I've got a film on the counter, maybe while I'm cooking or I'm watching a YouTube clip, I often have an AirPod in. Same with my iPhone. I barely use the actual speaker in the device.
So I do. We have stand-up at work. We do like an agile management thing. So we quite often have people in my office. For the remote people, we gather around my laptop, just because it's easier than booking a room. We do it every day. It takes 15 minutes. I use the speakers on my laptop then, because we're all on the camera. So that's when I notice it.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I guess occasionally I do that on my iPad. I join a call. We'll be sat in a conference room together. We just turn the iPad around to face both of us. So you're right. I do use it occasionally, but I'd love to see the stats of how much audio I play through the speakers, percentage-wise to headphones. I would imagine it will be minute in comparison to headphones.
Just think that'd be an interesting stat to record. And the other use case I've got is when I'm away somewhere, I'm in a hotel room, I open up the laptop, I'll put on some music, and I'll wander around the room. When I'm getting changed, or whatever in the morning. That's quite often a use case for laptop speakers too.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So that was some of the bad stuff. Then a really weird thing happened that has led me down a path. So the Bridges app that I've recommended before, which is how I capture links for this show, whenever if I'm on my phone or if I'm on a Mac, if I see something that's interesting, I bung them into Bridges, it syncs with iCloud, and then I'm able to get them on all devices, and then before you and I record, and you put yours in too, we put them in the show notes document, and I've got all my links there. Vanished from iCloud. Absolutely everything just vanished by installing the new Mac, as did NetNewsWire, which is where the other place I go to get stories. So everything in iCloud just vanished from the Mac. No matter what I did, I couldn't get them to come back. Still worked on the phone, switched it off and on again, tried things, waved the rubber chicken over it, gone.
That's frustrating.
It's extremely frustrating. And the diagnostic ability for us to go into iCloud to work out what's happening does not exist.
Absolutely zero. Must be a nightmare for a developer.
So I became quite distressed at this point where, two of the things that we've built our workflow for the podcast on weren't working for me. So, because I'm this kind of person, I threw the baby out with the bathwater. NetNewsWire, it's not its fault. Bridges, it's not its fault. They're great apps. Download them, use them. They're wonderful. But don't trust them for iCloud because it's not their fault.
Yeah, it's fair. It's got to be hard for them when they're backing off their syncing engine in essence to Apple.
Yeah, and it does make me worry about things that are heavily based on iPad. I know Marco Arment in Overcast has talked repeatedly about his unwillingness to move towards iCloud for syncing your feed sources with, because he's got no control over what happens there. And stuff like this, I'm an end user and it's upset the hell out of me. As a developer, if I had lots of customers, I'd be incensed.
No, I can understand that. And to be fair, I guess Marco has already done the hard work. He built his engine before it existed in iCloud. So why would you come away from it if you've already done the hard yards? Unless the maintenance of it, I guess, is too much.
It's the maintenance and it's the cost, isn't it? I know it costs him an awful lot in server fees to keep all those various feeds and the server side of his app running. So you can see the attraction of some developers. Well, it's iCloud, it should just work. It's Apple, blah, blah, blah. And stuff like this is a problem.
Yeah, agreed.
So it led me down a path, like I said. And the path it led me down to was, right, I need to host some of these services myself. So I host a limited number of these things. Again, our show notes exist on my Synology, or up till recently existed on our Synology. We can talk about that another day, perhaps. But what I needed was a news feed, an RSS caching server that I had control over so I'd know where my feeds were. And I needed something to store my links in. Now, the thing I store my links in, I had an intermediate step that I will recommend as App of the Week because I think it's really, really good. But what I found is 2 open source self-hosted services. The first one is called Link Warden, which I will put the link to in the show notes. I notice I haven't put the link in. I've only put it in for the other one. And Link Warden is a bookmarking service that you can sync to through an iOS shortcut or any browser shortcut on a desktop. So Firefox, Chrome, Safari, whatever, has an extension. The URL will be cached on my server. So all the show notes, 50% of the links for this podcast are all go on my server, and then you've got an awful lot of control over them. It will, if you want to, you can turn on a setting within it, and it will archive the whole site that you've been looking at in the same way that Wayback Machine does. So if you and I want to go and look at a story and it's vanished at some point, I can actually check a box and it will save that, which is super cool.
That is cool.
Which is cool. Or you can just use it as a means of persisting your links and then manage them going forward. So I'm going to have a go at this for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. But I've been really quite impressed with Link Warden. It was to get slightly technical for a second, it was a Docker container. I pasted something into my Portainer Docker container thing, hit go, boom, gone. And it's up and running. There's another part of this called Cloudflare Tunnels that I'll go into another time if you're interested, Chris, or a listener writes in and says they're interested in Cloudflare Tunnels for how you manage all the stuff and make them available publicly with very heavily quoted inverted commas around them on the internet so you can make use of the URLs. It's not just sitting inside of your own services in your house. So Link Warden was the first thing. I've now got an iOS shortcut that I can look at a story, look at a toot on my phone, tap it, it will fire a shortcut. Hey, I'm using a shortcut at last, and it will send that to the server, and it's almost instant. It works really, really well. I'm super impressed with it. And then the second part of this, to replace the RSS reading that I'd made use of in NetNewsWire, is an RSS publication service. So for those that remember Google Reader back in the day, it was a web-based service where all your stories would be cached into one thing. You could progress through stories by hitting the J key and going back with the K key. This is basically that, but it actually lets you subscribe to your own feed as well. So I have linked my NetNewsWire to my own instance of Fresh RSS, and I'm maintaining my own newsreading service. So there are others. There's InnoReader. There's a whole bunch of newsreading services that you can pay good money for. I've now got my own one. And that's where I am. So I've replaced 2 iCloud services with 2 self-hosted services that if they go wrong, it's my fault. It's nobody else's fault.
It would be interesting to check back in 6 months' time whether there's any burden on the self-hosting piece. That's probably the only thing that puts me off it, but I can 100% see why you're doing it, because that way you're in control, like you say. It's your data, you're hosting it, and then you're just using the front end of these apps in essence.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern about this is, and I don't want to get into the Cloudflare tunnels, is I'm putting things from my home internet, my home network on the internet. Now, I'm doing it in a managed way because I'm using Docker containers with all the security and yada, yada, yada. But it's always a bit of a worry when you're putting self-hosted services out there on the internet. Now, it's better than opening up my firewall. I'm not opening up my firewall. The way I'm doing this is through another service, the Cloudflare tunnel thing I'm talking about. And again, maybe we will get into that at a later date. It's too much for today. And you're then responsible for it. So my little mini PC that we talked about last week is running Docker containers that host all these things, and then there's infrastructure that has to be maintained. But I was running a lot of this stuff anyway. It's no additional electricity bill for me to do this. And other than buying a domain, which cost me 11 quid, I'm not out for very much at all. So I think it's worth a punt.
Yeah, I can understand that. And like I've done it with my email, I bought my own domain. I am using Apple's service on it at the moment, but I can always repoint that somewhere else. But I can understand why you've done what you've done. It is nice to have some ownership of what you've got, and not be on the hook with somebody else should it go wrong. So I can see why you've done it.
It's interesting to learn as well. How do these things come together? How do you do it? Will it change my habits for the way that I make use of my devices? And I think it makes it less sticky, for want of a better word. You're into that particular service for that amount of money to maintain a thing, and a lot of people pay for the news reading apps particularly to maintain those feeds, those sources for them to work through. I don't have that now. It's down to me.
Yeah, I must use iCloud on my NetNewsWire. I don't pay any monthly fee for it.
Wait till it goes wrong.
I think I have that many, but I probably have like 5. So for me, it's probably not a big thing. And I use it more so I don't go and check websites manually. I just go to NetNewsWire. It tells me when there's a new article there, and then I can go through to the website. But I probably have less than 10.
Do you not pay for Reader or one of those services in the background? No?
Nope.
Interesting. So then the third one was something called Nextcloud, which is a self-hosted Office replacement. Basically, it will give you Word and Excel and all these as well as a bunch of other stuff. So it's hosting a cloud service like an iCloud or Google Cloud or one of those other ones that gives you those services as well as photo backup and password encryption and all these kinds of stuff for you. So I've spun up a small instance of that too. Our show notes are currently in it at the moment. I think it looks a little bit better than Synology's ones. It's a little bit slower, but I think the font's look an awful lot better than the Synology one. And so far, our collaborative thing, I think, has worked quite well.
Yeah, it does. It looks like Word in a web browser in essence. It looks pretty good. I found it a little bit slow. It wanted to insert new sections when I pasted text in, which I found odd. But on the whole, I think it's very good, and it does render very nicely in the web browser, 100%. I don't know what they're doing, but they're clearly doing something.
Yeah, and the depth of the service is really impressive as well. You can do an awful lot with it. I've barely scratched the surface of what you can do. So, for example, I could create an account for you now with two-factor authentication, have your own space, your own document storage within another cloud that's, I don't know that it's more trustworthy because it's running on my servers, but at least you know where it's going as opposed to just vanishing into some, nameless Azure /Google /Apple server somewhere. And it's very easy to host for yourself. It wasn't a huge amount of effort to set it up with the right security certificates. It's all SSL and protected and all that kind of stuff too. So this is my third experiment of self-hosted things that I've exposed. It's out there in the world, and I'm taking the chances on them. But yeah, so that's been what my new MacBook Pro has sent me down.
Yeah, it's interesting where you've gone. It also supports all the Microsoft Office documents, docx, PPT, PPTX, so it's impressive for all of that as well for interoperability.
Yeah, and that's just part of it. It's groupware as well. It's designed for this sort of collaborative thing. There are iOS apps for it. You can run them. If you've got your own version of LibreOffice or something like that, you can link them directly to that, so you'll get more performance within it rather than just running it all within a web browser. It's really quite a clever thing.
Yeah, it does look good. Like I say, if you want to go down that and decouple yourself, I guess, some of the stuff you found is quite interesting, how much you can do self-hosted for not a lot of money.
Absolutely. So that's what I've been playing with. There's a final article about why I still chose Android over iOS that I'm not going to touch on. I think having had, we've gone a bit long today. We'll talk about it next week, and I'm going to talk about Android versus iOS stuff a little bit, if that's okay with you in the main show.
I think it'll be good next week because it's probably something I don't know enough about, and with some of the recent Apple piece, I did go and look at a Samsung tablet on Amazon, and I was like, oh, maybe I could use something like that. Why wouldn't I have one for, say, for my children? The price is quite interesting on some of the Samsung stuff. If you want the big fancy Tab Plus, it's about £1,200. So it is a bit cheaper, but it's still quite an expensive device.
The components of the thing. If you go to a reputable device manufacturer, the chances are you're paying for quality components within that, and that's always been our attraction to Apple. Is it costs more, but you get what you pay for. And it's that balance as with your streaming services. Is it still worth the price for what I'm getting? Anyway, but that's a discussion for next week. App of the week.
Go for it.
So my app of the week is raindrop.io. When Bridges failed me, not Bridges' fault. The developer's excellent. It's not his fault. It's iCloud's fault. I had to go and find something else quickly until I put in the hosting stuff that I've just been talking about. I found an app called raindrop.io, which is very similar to Bridges in the sense that it's a good way of quickly saving shortcuts or URLs that you found. It worked perfectly well. It syncs well with the Mac. It's available multi-platform. It's really impressive. I really like it. It's on my phone. I don't think it'll stay on my phone because we'll see how link warden and things like this go for me. But if you're looking for something to bookmark URLs in efficiently, effectively, share with other people, manage them, import them, export them, it's a really impressive app. It's really well made. Raindrop.io. It
looks really nice, actually. The screen grabs. I don't know, it looks a very nice app. It's quite dense, which I like in an app. They're piling lots of content in. I think it looks quite smart. I might give this one a look.
Yeah, I think it's worth a look. It doesn't do... Bridges had other sort of advantages for me. You'd be able to pull out links in Markdown and things like that, and I quite like the ability to have them more. But this does exactly what you want of an app like this to do. It presents your content. You can tag them for where you want to put them within that. This is for the podcast. This is for my own thing to read later. This is something else. And then you can manage them really effectively. The free version gives you a lot, but there is a paid-for version as well that's a little bit more. So I think it's a great app, and it was part of my journey of self-discovery. So I'd recommend people check it out. And the iOS and the macOS and the iPadOS apps are really good.
Okay, cool. So thing of the week, I've gone for my webcam that I bought because I was getting cheesed off with plugging my phone in each time. Logitech brought out a new webcam. It's like they knew I'd been tentatively looking. I nearly bought the old Brio, but I've gone for a Logitech MX Brio. It's about £220 here in the UK. I was hoping it might go on sale at some point, but I caved and bought one anyway. What a nice piece of kit. Typical Logitech. Comes in a little black box, very well packaged. Largely all recyclable, to be fair, very little plastic. It's USB-C, which was a big tick for me because a lot of them come with USB-A and C. I just wanted complete USB-C. It's plugged in the back of my monitor at the moment because I don't have enough ports directly on my Mac. And it looks great. It's got a physical shutter on it, so you can turn the front of the camera and a shutter comes down, which for privacy people, I'm sure they'll be very keen on that. It's got a light on it so you know it's on. You can do some AI stuff with the app, but actually, do you know what, on the Mac you can just plug it in and it works. You don't need to install anything, but you can install the Logitech Options Plus app, so you can do some configuration. If you've already got other Logitech peripherals such as keyboards or mice, it's the same app to do customization. And do you know what, for somebody that hasn't got a camera built into their screen, or even if I do move my studio display over, I would probably still use this camera because it's 4K, it's a lot better quality. Like I said, whilst it was pricey, I didn't want to buy a cheaper one and then wish I'd bought the more expensive one. I'd like to buy once and keep it. And something like this, you'll keep for a long time, I think, because if it's 4K, USB-C, it's a great little camera. But Logitech makes some fantastic hardware, I think. It's not super premium and expensive, but it's not cheap. And I think they do that good middle ground. I've got the MX keyboard, I've got some MX mice. So would definitely recommend. It's weird how they're using their MX branding on everything now. I think they're really leaning into it because it's got quite a good name, I think, for them as a slightly more premium brand and more premium materials. So for a 4K camera, I think it looks great. And when these things hit a sale point and get under the £200 mark, I reckon they'll be a worthy buy for a lot of people.
So it's £219. That's either graphite or pale grey. Which one did you go for?
I'm going to say graphite. I don't know. It's like a dark grey cylinder with a black camera on it.
Right, so I think you went for the graphite one. Fair enough. I thought the pale grey might have fit your studio display a little bit better. What control does it give you? Can you mess with like the refresh rate on it? What additional features does it give you?
So there's nothing no real buttons on it other than the shutter. But if you go into the app, I don't want to, maybe maybe I shouldn't have fiddled with it.
You shouldn't have fiddled with it.
I'm going to turn that off. You can change the refresh rate from 50 or 60 hertz, so that if you've got lights that flicker, you can change the warmth of the picture. You can do some AI stuff with it. You can have some presets set up. So it looks quite comprehensive compared to nearly any other camera I think that I've used, certainly the Apple stuff. But I liked it. I just literally plugged it in and I was off to the races. And like I say, even if at the moment I'm not using my studio display on this Mac, but at some point I'm hoping to move that over, and when I do, I would use this camera instead of the studio display one, because it's just so much better. It's a lot crisper image. It's nice to have something plugged in all the time. The iPhone stuff is good, but it's frustrating that you've got to take your phone out, put it on top there. So I don't know, it just seems a nice device. I'm dead chuffed with it. It was a little more money than I wanted to spend, but I gave up waiting.
Fair enough. Good choice. Bit of hardware too.
But yeah, a little bit of hardware. I think I needed to scratch that itch.
And the viewers who watch us on YouTube, which you'll tell the link about in a minute, can tell us whether they like it or not.
Yep. Yeah, you can. I'd like to have some feedback on it. Was it a worthy purchase?
I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. So look, if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch us on YouTube if you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.